time, you would probably completely transform their appreciation and awareness and support for music.
Yeah, and
for life.
And the result was that we had an increased grant from these people.
Exactly.
And that was the objective.
Yeah.
Now, looking at this country, one of the things I want to explore at the NEC is the idea of doing an Animateur program and linking it to the field, linking it to the orchestral world and the music industry, to say, look, we're going to be producing people with new skills who you should be looking at. People who can be extraordinary, can go into your community and create connections that you've never dreamt of and change people's lives and change people's attitudes.
But that needs to be taught from the ground up, and that's probably not happening in a complete sense yet. And one of the things that I was going to ask you is whether you feel yet whether orchestras are in a place to move past. It's not just, obviously you have to have excellence is the baseline. You need to be able to pass that audition. Whether orchestras are now, when they're looking for new players, whether they're looking at their communication potential, their education, their technology, their whatever other skills they might have learned at college. Obviously we know that in higher education we need to teach those now, but are orchestras actually looking for those yet?
Well, to begin with, excellence is not enough. Excellence is where you start. If we are to meet the challenges of the contemporary world in its attitude to classical music, if we are to increase its relevance, and if we are to stop it being a peripheral art form, which is the danger that we're facing at the moment, we need to think very differently about how we deliver music and the skills that it takes to deliver music as well. Everything really relates to a union contract. And I'm not being critical of a union contract. You need to have parameters, but the union contract really decides how people are auditioned. And in this country, I would say 99% of people are auditioned purely on the basis of how they perform. There are no interviews. Nobody is saying, okay, you can play the violin tremendously well, but what's the whole package? What's the whole package you can offer this community and this organization? Does the package include your education skills, communication skills? Do you want to become involved with the work of an orchestra in a wider context? Are you great at raising money? Can you entertain people for our development department? What's the whole package? Nobody has gone there.
So we know that we need to teach that and set people up to be at the top of the food chain, I believe is the way that you put it. But we need to have the organisations receptive and ready and aware that that's what is out there and could benefit them. Yeah,
and in order to reach that point, we have to, I think, come to the realisation that the model that we're using for orchestras is in desperate need of revision and change. And I don't just mean tinkering around the edges, putting on extra coffee concerts or drive home concerts or whatever you might call them, all of which is creative and fine, but doesn't go far enough. We don't need more marketing ideas. We've had a plethora of marketing ideas. Now we need a design change. And we need to think of the skills of our musicians, and we need to think about how we can best use those skills to benefit the community, and to come away from the idea that the only audience we serve is a core subscription audience. That has changed. It changed a long time ago, and the field is basically in denial over that change. People still, I've seen them get quite flustered at a terrific report that was produced just a few years ago by the Knight Foundation. And I was strongly involved with that when I was with the Oregon Symphony. And the Knight Foundation worked with about 15 orchestras in America. They also undertook the most in-depth study of audiences and audience response and community response. And basically they came up with an analysis that showed that when you perform, you're performing to not one core audience, you're performing to a dozen or more audiences. An audience, and if you look at the various layers of the audience, let's say you have the music specialists, which may be as small as 5 or 6%. And yet I think erroneously we think that that's the audience.
They're the ones we tend to market to, whether it's the way we write program notes or the way we sell subscriptions.
Yeah. You look at program notes. I mean, program notes are largely indecipherable by 95% of people attending concerts. Why do we do that? It's an inherent problem in the way we think, and we're still thinking in 19th century terms as far as that's concerned. But you look at those concentric circles of audience experience. You've got your tiny core audience. You've got audience members who have very limited experience, but maybe have heard stuff on a film that they have really liked, and they've researched it. Or you have people who are just learning an instrument for the first time. You have people who've been dragged to a concert because their wife or their husband wants to go, and they've brought people along. You've got people who've been given freebies who are just coming along because it's a cheap night out. But you've got multiple layers of audience. And in the way that we're presenting to them, we are still creating all sorts of barriers. And one of the major findings in that Knight Foundation report was there is nothing wrong with the art form. Nobody's going to say next year, huge expose, Beethoven symphonies, rubbish. You shouldn't be playing them, And this is what we all feel now, so that it comes out of the... It's not going to happen. But what they're basically saying is it is the vehicle of delivery. And it's the vehicle of delivery which we have done nothing about.
So it's the vehicle that needs to be changed.
It does. I think it could be a very, very creative process. If you look at musicians in an orchestra, if you take the basic contract in America, musicians in a 52-week orchestra would receive 10 weeks worth of vacations, and their normal working week would be about 18 hours. Level of pay would be in 6 figures. Now you would think that would breed happiness, contentment, joyfulness, and a huge zest to play music. In large part it doesn't.
And why is that?
Because people get their artistic fulfillment as very skilled musicians largely outside their workplace.
Which is a major statement to make.
I think it is. They get it teaching, they get it playing chamber music, they get it conducting their local youth orchestra, they get it conducting their community orchestra, but they get it in other ways.
So that's their own individual fulfillment in their own interests,
yes,
which isn't necessarily fed by the main organisation all
Absolutely,
the time.
Which, if you like the role of an orchestral musician in its purely 19th century form,